Hi everyone, welcome to Hearthside. I'm Michelle, I'm the author on this blog, and I have been creating video versions of all my blog entries to make them a bit more accessible to a wider audience. So today I am looking at the entry called Fair Speech, Deeds, and Kinship in Modern Heathen Practice. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about the idea of fair speech. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with that term, so I'll go over that in a minute. Where I encountered it first was actually before I considered myself a heathen. I was studying Beowulf in university, and it's in that text quite a bit when Beowulf is talking in the hall and talking with other people. So fair speech is very much tied to other heathen concepts such as deeds and kinship. All three of these concepts relate to frith and grith in a way that is interwoven and pretty much impossible to separate them. So for that purpose, I'm going to focus mostly on fair speech and then bring in these other concepts where it makes sense to do so. So what fair speech is, it basically boils down to being civil and courteous and having the ability to express yourself without being disruptive to the social order or causing unnecessary offense. So within a tribe, this takes the form of having a difference in opinion with one of your kin, but expressing it in dialogue in such a way that all parties can engage openly and work through it, and it won't create any permanent rifts. So basically it's the give and take within that sort of conversation so that you can come to some sort of consensus. Fair speech occurs when all the parties involved are speaking carefully and intelligently and are making themselves understood, but also making sure that they're actively listening and understanding everyone else and any opposing views. With this understanding comes humility and compromise when necessary to maintain the frith of the group. So ideally, a discussion of differences of opinions with tribe is meant to draw the party who's farthest from the shared values of the tribe back into the group frith and reinforce the bonds of kinship. Now, since we're talking about kinship, that's where I will pull that term in. So, kin determine how much of an opposing view the individual can carry without being disruptive to the functioning of the tribe as a whole. So as such, the compromises that must be made basically to maintain the group frith and ensure the benefit of everybody and well-being of everybody who is in that tribe. So in some cases it's going to be the individual who needs to compromise, and sometimes it would be the group, and usually it's going to be both. If an individual is unwilling to compromise and be self-reflective, then they risk alienation from that tribe. This said, if someone new enters into a tribe, it does always cause a bit of a shift in thinking for the tribe as a whole, as the individual helps to reinforce the values that that tribe already holds, while also bringing new elements to explore and grow the tribe and its frith. So the new values of the tribe reform basically around the new member as they become part of the whole. The tribe moves to meet the individual as long as the individual is also willing to move to meet the tribe. So they have to accept responsibility when they misstep and learn how to fit in within the established order. With kinship, there is a sense of responsibility to a group of people, to be involved in their lives, to do what is best for the group, and to maintain and build frith. And these are the people who are going to be the closest to you, either by blood or oath, and they are the people who have your best interest in mind, and you share bonds of reciprocity with them. So you have a lot of stake in their well-being, and they have a lot of stake in your well-being because the well-being is shared. So both the way you interact with kin and the way that you present yourself to the broader community will affect the luck of the tribe. So coming back to the idea of fair speech, another element of fair speech is the connection between what is said and what is done. So there is an expectation that an individual will speak carefully, especially when oathing, to ensure that they can follow through with that oath and maintain the luck of the tribe. An individual's worth to the tribe hinges on their ability to turn speech into action and prove their trustworthiness while establishing frith. So in terms of how fair speech works in the situation of grith instead of frith within the tribe, it's also necessary to maintain poise and be careful in your speech when interacting with people who are outside of your tribe. This prevents causing insult that would come back and hurt the tribe. The individual living within a tribal structure must always be aware of how their behaviors are going to be affecting the tribe when they're dealing with outside persons and groups, because everything is going to come back and affect the well-being of your group, either in that moment or down the road. It's important that the tribe and the members establish grith with other heathens, but it's also important to use fair speech with other strangers outside of heathenry as well to have a good image for your tribe, and prevent any harm from these outside parties. So this is especially true in the modern landscape, because tribal communities are not the norm anymore, and for that reason it's easily misunderstood by outside parties. In pre-Christian Scandinavia, the focus of fair speech in establishing grith would have prevented feuds between tribes. However, in the modern context, fair speech more commonly is going to be used in associating with individuals and groups who don't have any understanding of tribal dynamics or grith, and also no understanding of fair speech quite often. So this leads to a more challenging dynamic. A member of a tribe still needs to maintain fair speech whenever is possible to avoid causing lasting offense, and also they might not be sure the other party is going to act reciprocally because, as I said, they're not necessarily familiar with the idea of fair speech. Even within heathenry, I think that this is a term that needs to be used more often and understood on a deeper level, because it's very relevant in all of your interactions. Even with strangers, it's best to exercise caution, as you might have another future interaction with that person, or your tribe might, even if you don't expect that you will. So, like, even if you just see someone on the street and you have an argument, like, about who knows where you parked your car or whatever, like, civility is always important, because you never know when you're going to see that person again. This doesn't mean that the individual should continue to act eloquently when dealing with a party that has made it clear that they're unwilling to reciprocate. The individual needs to be careful about weighing their deeds to determine what's the least harmful interaction. But if the opposing party is acting openly hostile, then there's a possibility that they cannot be reasoned with and should just be avoided or else treated as hostile. The importance of deeds within heathenry is also related to this concept, because deeds within heathenry is how you prove your worth to your tribe. So your actions show your character, and when you follow through with them, then it increases the luck of your tribe. So by acting for the good of your tribe, or acting honorably, your deeds gain worth. And your deeds are really just an extension of this fair speech, because everything that you're saying, when you put it into action, then that's when it comes to fruition. So it's important to realize that not only your actions and deeds, but also your words as well, are interconnected with the concept of fair speech. Your deeds show that you are reliable and trustworthy, and that your value is on those kinship bonds. Deeds are connected with frith, because individuals act for the well-being of the community, and to do so they think before they're acting or speaking, because they don't want to cause harm to their kin. Since speech acts are also considered deeds in some cases, then that makes fair speech itself a deed in some regards. As you see, all of these concepts are connected like strands of a spider web, so you really can't have one without the other or see the whole structure, and if you were to pick one out, then the whole structure would crumble. So Beowulf is really an excellent resource that I find for helping you understand the power of fair speech, and you see different people within that text acting with fair speech or without fair speech, and you see how their luck is and what happens to them as a result. But of course there's other places that we can find it in the lore. You can think of Loki's taunts in the Lokasenna, and how that drives Loki away from the Aesir. There are also tons of other examples within the lore. I will give some of them in the links below, but there are so many that I'm not going to put all of them, obviously. If you have watched all the way through this to the end, I hope that you find it valuable, and thank you so much for continuing to support my channel as well as my blog, and I hope to see you next time.